Bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everyone.
Ravi d'être avec vous ce soir.
It is a pleasure for me to be here with you tonight.
Petite évocation de la Formule 1.
We started by mentioning Formula One because we just signed a contract. Vuitton, Moët, Chandon, Tagueilleur for Formula One for 10 years, starting this year. And I believe it is going quite impactful for the three relevant brands.
Aujourd'hui, une fois n'est pas coutume, je ne vais pas annoncer
Today,
des résultats records. Mais néanmoins,
I'm not going to report record revenue, but it was nonetheless a robust year, and I am rather confident for the year to come.
En effet, en 2024, on a réussi à avoir une petite croissance.
Indeed, in 2024, we managed to report a little bit of organic growth of our revenue, despite what some of you, because there are a lot of analysts here, despite what quite a few of you expected.
Est en baisse.
However, the operating income is going down, but let's look at the context. There is 1 billion coming from outstanding items.
Plus, l'année commence bien, je vous explique.
Besides, 2025 is starting well, and I will tell you all about it in a moment.
Une année solide,
a robust year,
marquée quand même par un environnement économique mondial difficile,
despite a challenging
faiblesse
global environment,
par le Japon,
weaknesses in Asia, except Japan, that reported strong growth thanks to its currency. The United States,
un peu incertain,
uncertainty because of election year.
S'en sort pas mal.
Europe is faring quite well,
globalement,
but all in all,
était quand même plus délicate.
The context was a little bit more challenging.
Nos métiers se sont bien comportés dans cet environnement, en particulier la mode et maroquinerie.
Our business groups fared well, especially fashion and leather goods. We saw a lot of innovation in watches and jewelry, fragrances and cosmetics. Well, we still have the two world-leading fragrances, Sauvage by Dior and Miss Dior. And in selective retailing, DFS, our retailing company in charge of distributing tax-free products, was a little bit challenged by the context. The currency in its geographies, Hong Kong or Macau,
n'ont pas permis à beaucoup de Chinois
did not enable a lot of Chinese people to shop in these areas. There was a big gap with the Chinese currency.
C'est un événement qui a marqué cette année, alors que Sephora a une performance.
And yet, Sephora reported exceptional growth. We're not going to give the figures directly, but a great performance from Sephora. Remarkable. Since we've bought this company, well, it was a while back, 1998. In 1998, it was about 100 million euros of revenue, something close to that. And now, Sephora's revenues stand at more than 10 times that. Let me count. Yeah, a lot more. I can't give you all the figures because you would not believe them. Anyway, what I would like to say,
un peu plus difficile sur le plan économique global.
2024 was a little bit challenging from an economic standpoint, but we stuck to our commitments in terms of diversity,
accompagnement de nos collaborateurs,
our commitments to support our employees, promoting their safety, their well-being, and we also stuck to our environmental commitments. Our environmental commitments are at the heart of our Maison's creativity. Two major events in 2024, the Olympic Games. We were one of the main sponsors, and the team in charge of the Olympic Games here, Antoine, leading the team, was able to highlight our brands, and I'm sure you've noticed, they highlighted our brands in a surprising way. I did enjoy with the boat on the Seine River, with the Vuitton suitcases. It was a first. Well, it was a first to have an opening ceremony outside of a stadium, but we were able to bring some celebrities dressed by the maisons, and it was really a hit. Now, this is linked to the drop in recurring operating income because it did cost us a lot of money. And we also supported the renovation of Notre Dame. We were very proud, and there's going to be a visit this week with all the employees. I do not know if you invited the analysts, maybe not. But all the employees have been invited to Notre Dame for a special tour. It's not fully open to the public, but they are going to see the renovation. Back to business. Wines and spirits. We can see that demand is normalizing. Champagne still fared well, even though there was a small decrease. However, cognac and spirits reported a more substantial decrease, and in 2 years we expect to see a good recovery, especially since we have a new team. Our CFO right here, who's been working with me for more than 20 years, who is known as a good CFO, you know, based on the ratings, or because now there are ratings for CFOs. So if I believe the ratings, he's excellent, and since he's very familiar with the wines and spirits business groups, and he is supported by Alexandre, who is very familiar with wines, I'm sure that they will support the recovery. Let's give them 2 years to see, to show them. Let's give them 2 years so that they can show us what they can do. Now, something even more important in terms of revenue, fashion and leather goods, starting with Louis Vuitton, major events, 10 years of creation by Nicolas Chesquier in the Louvre, Pharrell Williams fashion show at UNESCO. At the end of last year, great success with what we called a pop-up. So it is a pop-up that's twice the size as the previous brick-and-mortar store, but it is always full, many people, and since it's opening, can we talk about the revenue? Is it a secret? Well, more than twice the revenue of the previous store. So this is working quite well.
Beaucoup de nouveautés, je ne vais pas rentrer dans le détail, des produits.
A lot of new products, never full inside out, the Speedy, P9.
Toutes les malles extraordinaires.
And the fantastic suitcases, because Louis Vuitton is not a fashion brand. I like to stress that because Pietro is a fan of fashion, so I always like to structure my message.
Vuitton, c'est un maroquinier.
Vuitton makes leather goods.
Spécialiste du voyage.
They are experts in travels. It is a culture and poetry maison. And I introduced fashion in the 1990s into Louis Vuitton, but it is the fashion aspect is an accessory. Our designers are not here, so we can say it. But we did say it when they were part of the meeting. Another major maison, Christian Dior. Fantastic fashion shows as well, one in New York, one on a cruise in Scotland. That fashion show in Scotland was fantastic. I do not know if you're familiar with Scotland, but usually it rains, and it was a miracle. The weather was fantastic for this fashion show. So that was a blessing. Then high jewelry, broke all records, a store in Geneva. Do go if you go to Geneva. It is quite surprising. It was designed by Christian Porzampar. It is really outstanding and it is quite successful. And this year, so in 2025, we are going to reopen the New York store and a store in Beverly Hills as well.
Et nous avons aussi de nombreux projets de défilés.
We also have a lot of projects for exhibitions and fashion shows. In 2024, we organized a fantastic exhibition in Saudi Arabia,
faite avec nos amis saoudiens.
hand in hand with our Saudi friends, and they contributed actively. As for the other maisons, they are also reporting good results. So Loro Piana, great success, double-digit growth. Celine, Loewe, Fendi, Marc Jacobs, Rimowa as well, that is reporting good results, and Berluti. As for fragrances and cosmetics,
vient cette année beaucoup des parfums, et nous avons des parfums.
Great contribution from this business groups. We have a strong momentum in fragrances. We've got Sauvage and Miss Dior that are buoying this business, and even at Louis Vuitton, you know, the fragrances only sold in Louis Vuitton are quite successful. I'm not going to give you any figures, but you would be surprised. It is quite a high figure. As for the other fragrance brands, well, Francis Kurkdjian, it's smaller, but it's a fantastic creator who is also in charge of designing the Dior perfumes. He has his own brand, and we are partners, so it's working rather well as well. So fragrances are working well. Then moving on to watches and jewelry. For watches and jewelry, we have exceptional brands. Tiffany, a record year with its landmark in New York.
Atteindre les meilleurs, par exemple, au dernier trimestre, parce qu'on a dit que...
In Q4 2024, they had great results. Some people said that the revenue was not very good, but we did had a 9% organic growth, which is not bad. It is just as much as the largest jewelry brands.
Les ventes de haute joaillerie.
So high jewelry revenue reported great growth. Same for Bulgari, great result there with some new collections. Tubogas, for example, which is being presented in the Bulgari store in Place Vendôme and also in the Bon Marché store. So it's great result there as well. Tag Heuer launched a new watch, Monaco. You know, the Monaco watch is a square watch that was worn by Ayrton Senna when he won the Monaco Grand Prix. I forgot what year.
Montre iconique.
But it is one of Tag Heuer's iconic watches. Tag Heuer is going to be the official timekeeper of all Formula One competitions for 10 years. So this is going to have a very good impact on the future. At Louis Vuitton, we acquired a new brand, a rather interesting brand. It is called l'EPA, and they design hot air balloons, various sizes, outstanding. Do go and have a look in the Vuitton flagship. It is a great craftsmanship, rather impressive. Last but not least, selective retailing. As I said in my introduction, DFS has been challenged, but outstanding results for Sephora, a fantastic team.
Beaucoup aux États-Unis, on est de très très loin la première chaîne de distribution.
We are the first perfume and cosmetics retailer in the US for selective retailing, in the US and in many countries, so we have an exceptional team.
Et le Bon Marché,
as for Le Bon Marché, so in Paris, well, they reported good results as well.
De bons résultats cette année.
Continued growth and good results for 2024. I also need to mention that throughout the year, our training program or our training results were good, and the Excellence Profession Institute welcome 4,500 people at the Carré du Temps to start a new year of training.
aller dans le sens de l'artisanat de grande précision.
It is going to be about high precision craftsmanship.
Des meilleurs
Different businesses will be involved, and we are going to train the best craftspeople,
dans le groupe,
and the objective is to recruit them in the group at different positions,
soit des CDI, enfin, avoir en fonction des besoins. Et
permanent contract, short-term contract.
voilà. Et donc, avec tout ça, je pense qu'en 2025, on a tous les atouts pour continuer à améliorer encore notre
Some trainees, but all in all, in 2025 we have everything we'll need to continue being the leader in the luxury industry. And as I said earlier, in 2025 is starting rather well, with quite a few companies. Well, I mean, it is January, end of January, so let's not anticipate too much. But we have quite a few companies that reported double-digit growth. Louis Vuitton, since you're here, or Tiffany, which both reported a double-digit growth since the beginning of the year. That is it. I think Mr. Guioni is now going to take the floor to tell you more about the figures. I imagine that this is what interests you more than my explanation. Thank you very much.
Bonsoir à tous.
Good evening.
Quelques chiffres.
A couple of figures for you
Résumé ici.
that you can see on the screen. These are the major trends for the year. As Monsieur Arnaud has said, revenue is fairly stable on organic growth, for instance, and operating income is impacted by the difference between organic growth and impact, minus 14%.
Au niveau d'étiage qu'on avait atteint avant la crise de la...
We are back to where we were on COVID.
Une satisfaction de l'année sur le plan financier qui progresse de 30%.
We're also up 30%.
Sur la dette, une diminution du ratio d'endettement.
Debt has gone down, as you can see. The investments are still high because we want to invest in the future, and I'll come back to that later. Let's look at sales first and revenue. 84.6 billion in revenue. I'll tell you more about 1% for organic growth, 1% for scope, that's negligible, and 2% on Forex, which is nothing. But it is impactful, as you will see.
L'équilibre des ventes a
The revenue mix has not really changed. My screen is perfectly illegible, so I'll just go on what I remember. Europe and US are both at 25% more or less. Asia 28%, slightly lower than last year, which was around 31%. And Japan is up 2 percentage points from 7 to 9%. Again, because of the way revenue has happened, and I think I'll tell you more about it on the next slide. There we go. Quarter by quarter sales and revenue in the various geographies. What can you see? Well, if you look at the left first, the US were slightly up at the end of the year. Not that it is obvious given the numbers, but it is slightly more favorable than at the end of the year, both in quality and quantity. If you look at the numbers at the beginning of the year, they were significantly influenced by Sephora, whereas at Q4 it's far more balanced. Fashion, jewelry and Sephora both contribute to seeing our business grow in North America and the US more specifically. You can see that in Japan there's a bit of a slowdown. Is it really a slowdown? I mean, we are up 28% this year and 28% last year, so the starting point was high, but it was very high at the end of the year, hence the only 8% increase. Asia is still pretty difficult all year round. That's true across Asia, including mainland China, roughly 10% drop over the year. As for Europe, it's similar to what you saw in the US, slight improvement, and at the end of the year, mainly in fashion and leather goods. If you look at the different business groups, well, there again, you have great variety, as was the case with the geographies. Some businesses are pretty much at balance. Look at, for instance, fashion and leather goods at -1. Organic growth, watches and jewelry also pretty stable. 4% increase, and that's noteworthy on perfumes and cosmetics, and even more noteworthy for selective retailing. But you have DFS and Sephora that have two very contrasting situations, and then wines and spirits, difficult situation. We'll come back to that later, but the organic growth is actually negative 8. Quarterly trends, well, nothing really dramatic. On Q4, the numbers are pretty much close to the yearly average, and there's a bit of a dip in Q3. That's particularly true for the group. Wines and spirits, you haven't got more of a dip. It's just stable. I mean, not very good. And down the bottom, fashion and leather goods, you do have the dip. So no major change quarter after quarter, but things are improving, especially for watches and jewelry, thanks to Tiffany, as Mr. Arnaud has said. Before we move to the next slide, let me just look at the operating margin by business. As I told you, we had stable revenue, organic and overall. So nothing tremendously bad there, but we have had to look at our costs. And as you will see, our operating costs have increased 2%, which is more than the increase in revenue, and therefore has led to negative leverage, meaning that the current operating margin has actually gone down more than revenue. So from a management point of view, that was a bit of a dilemma. Insofar as we could have been more active on taking costs down, and that would have meant that we're saying that the crisis was structural, but it isn't. It is circumstantial, and we have to be able to react, and we wouldn't want to damage our potential budget or marketing budgets for later. So we had to strike a balance. I think we sort of managed. We have contained cost increase, not quite to the same tune as the drop in revenue, which has led to some profit drops in some businesses, but it's not that bad overall. Look at the specifics. Wines and spirits, the drop is fairly considerable here, minus 36%. This is due not to cost increases. Indeed, our costs for wines and spirits have gone down for over 2024, but we are seeing a slight drop in volume, a drop in prices, and a drop in mix, which explains this. Then DFS. As you know, most of that business is in Hong Kong and Macau, and the currency is pegged to the US dollar, high compared to the renminbi, meaning that for mainland Chinese, there's no point in them going to Macau or Hong Kong to do their shopping. So the sources of revenue have dropped, or rather dried out. So DFS had a very specifically difficult year with hundreds of millions of losses on that. Which brings me now to the income statement. trying to show that costs have increased slightly faster than revenue, meaning a drop in margins. Remember, revenue minus 2%. Then gross margin, that was a bit tricky. About 180 basis points, which is a bit more than we had expected. Two factors can explain this. First of all, we haven't, or almost haven't, increased prices last year, so we couldn't offset in gross margin the increase in the price of labor, the cost of labor, or input. We weren't also able to cover and offset the drop in hedging. I don't usually pay this, but the fact is that we usually get profit from hedges, and then when that stops, you've increased the prices of your products and offset it. That's what we've been doing for years and years. But seeing as we haven't done this, the forex effect is in fact particularly negative. The second explanation is that there have been a number of one-offs affecting the gross margin, which explains about half of the gross margin going down. There's one issue that is very technical. You're probably familiar with that. The fact is that the margin on own champagne or grapes is booked the year of the harvest. We didn't have much, and therefore not a very good margin, and indeed a negative margin as compared to the previous year, so about 100 million. Then a number of provisions had to be booked, not the usual ones about, seasonal ones, where you're factoring in inventory, unsold inventory. No, we're talking about a number of other provisions to the tune of a number of dozens of millions, and that has therefore had an impact on the gross margin. Then, expenses, as I said, on the whole, a 2% increase on expenses for admin and sales. Sales expenditure up 3%. For instance, store openings that have been decided in 2021, 22, 23, and that are now open, and that has contributed to the cost base. Something else, marketing. We have held back on marketing, bringing down the marketing cost by about 5%. You know the old saying that half of your marketing expenses are pointless, but you don't quite know which ones. So we have increased this. General and admin expenses has gone up 9%, therefore, because of a number of non-recurring events, such as the Olympic Games, for instance, but also the LVMH share plan for employees opened to employees in 2024 and booked here under general and admin. So all of this means that recurring operations profits has gone down 14%. Then there are a number of non-recurring items. First of all, the restructuring of DFS in Italy and in France with the sale of La Samaritaine to LVMH with significant losses, then withdrawal from Stella McCartney, and then the divestment of Off-White, and there again there was a significant loss. If you have any specific questions, I can go into greater detail, because it's a real accounting loss, but not real in terms of cash flow. Financial income, I'll tell you more about that later. Always a great pleasure, isn't it? Income tax is at 28% now, and this is in great part due to Japan and the share of Japan in the group's profit, because the income tax rate in Japan is slightly higher than the average rates across the board. So we're talking about 6 billion spent in cash.
6 milliards tous les ans.
6 billion every year, roughly. We therefore have to increase, don't we, the taxes on these exporting companies in France. You know what this means. We are paying our taxes. All in all, net profit is 12.5 billion, down 17% on last year, which was a record high year, just so you remember. The forex impact, exchange rate fluctuations, I told you that we had a bit of a problem offsetting it, but we are talking about 1 billion roughly, which is about a third of our operating profit changes, explained by forex. Financial expenses, debt servicing basically, was at 2.7% last year, about 3.1% this year, slightly up. Then lease liabilities under IFRS 16, that too has gone up because the rates have gone down. I'm sure you've understood me or not. Either way, I probably said it wrong. Then Forex, we've shortened our hedging horizons and bring back together the put and calls. We've decided, therefore, to bring down the expenses of our hedging, given the level the number of currencies has reached, including US dollar, and as concerns expenses, or rather capital gains, are somewhere around 500 million, but it's only latent, not actually booked. Then we've seen a small increase in inventory, a little drop on the put, on the debt for Diageo. Everyone's mentioned this, and it's of course related to the multipliers in Moët, Hennessy, etc. I'll come back to that later, maybe.
Un cash flow disponible, comme je vous l'ai dit, quand même une satisfaction qui est
cash flow, free cash flow has gone up 2.4 billion, despite the drop in profit, which has had an impact on cash flow. Why? Well, because working capital requirements is related to inventory. We had not increased our inventory very much this year. We had the previous year, so improvement there. And operating expenses, or operating investments rather, have been brought down 5.5 billion, although there was a bit less than expected last year. So for operating free cash flow is up 2.4 billion, always a good thing to have, meaning, as you can see on the next slide, that our debt has gone down from 10.7 to 9.2 billion. With a ratio of 13% roughly, so fairly low all in all. And then dividend payout, we will be suggesting the General Assembly adopt a €13 payout, €7.5 to be paid in April after the interim payment of $5.5 in December. This is a stable level of dividend. We've chosen to keep the dividend stable in difficult times and make the most of plentiful periods to increase the payout. I must say that this is my 86th and final presentation of LVMH results. Thank you.
Bon, mesdames, messieurs, nous sommes
Ladies and gentlemen,
pour répondre à quelques questions.
We're here to answer your questions, if you have any. I would like, yes, we need to make sure that we can see you. Otherwise, you were all in the dark.
Il faudrait donner des numéros aux personnes qu'on puisse.
You should give a number to the people so that we know who they are.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Lucas Soka from Bernstein.
J'ai une question sur la performance.
My question has to do with the cyclical demand performance. You just reported an improving performance in Q4 in most geographies, and also an encouraging performance for January 2025. Could you give us more information about the various geographies? What is happening, especially with the Chinese and American customers?
La deuxième question rentre un peu dans le détail.
Second question about fashion and leather goods.
Dans la presse, les déclarations.
I believe I've read Mr. Guioni's statements in the press. He talked about a performance that was slightly better for Vuitton and slightly worse for Dior.
Je me demande si vous êtes en effet bien satisfait de la performance de Dior.
Are you fully satisfied with Dior's performance?
Ce qu'on reprend du marché, et par exemple en parlant par les grands magasins, nous donne l'idée que la marque est dans une période d'inflexion.
It looks like the brand is in an inflection period, more than a slight decrease, if you see what I mean. And third question, Mr. Arnault, we saw you in the front row at the American president's inauguration. Could you tell us what the group is planning on doing with the US in terms of LVMH business development, in terms of geographical repositioning, potentially, putting more focus on the US? Do we have anything to fear in terms of tariffs? Thank you. Okay, you can start with the customers. Mr. Guioni, Chinese customers, so from mainland China. So for 2024, they remain stable, which is worth noting. Of course, it was positive in H1 and slightly less in H2. However, we can see that the situation has been improving in Q4, so it is not outstanding, it's not decisive. It's very difficult to comment the day before Chinese New Year what is going to happen with Chinese customers. You need to be careful, but generally speaking, I'm talking about fashion and leather goods, I should have mentioned. But just for fashion and leather goods, customers reported good performance. As for the US, we share the same observation. Stable customer base for the year, but negative in H1 and positive in H2. So here again, take that with a pinch of salt, because it's not a major gap. We're not going from -10 to plus 2025, which would be an undeniable trend. We're talking about small discrepancies, small gaps, about something that is slightly negative to something that is slightly positive, but it's still noteworthy. Mr. Arnault, this is what I can tell you about Dior. For the group in general, we are fortunate, but this is a result of the work that has been done by our teams, and I would like to congratulate all of them. Quite a few people from the Maison who work in fashion and who are here in the front row and who are reporting outstanding performances, especially in terms of creativity. So what I would like to say is that we are fortunate in the group because we have the best designers. And they are loyal. We keep them in the house for a very long time, which is important. Because our relationship with these designers goes beyond the traditional business relationship that you can see in some maisons. And it is the same with our employees. All employees here in the room, in the front row, have been with us for a very long time. I would say on average 20 years. And, I must say that they are faring well, and they will fare well in the future as well. So this explains the fact that, there is a continuity, and it is essential. When you have too many changes, too fast, in this industry, it is difficult, it is challenging. Now, back to Dior. Dior is the #1 French haute couture brand. It belongs to a French group, and
parce qu'on estime, on regarde les concurrents également.
We're looking at our competitors, and it is the maison that reported the best performance in 2024. I'm not going to give you the figures. You won't be surprised because we only give a global figure.
Dans un environnement plus difficile.
But so in a more challenging environment, we mentioned it several times in my presentation and in Jean-Jacques' presentation. So it is a challenging environment, but this maison fared best compared to its competitors. And we're hopeful and we're confident.
L'année 2025.
We believe that for many reasons, 2025 is going to see Dior and Haute Couture and Vuitton as well. The other maisons are going to change as well. But I am confident. We believe that they are going to be in the spotlights. I am optimistic. We always need to be cautious, but I am confident. And I back from the US, as you've kindly mentioned, and I saw the momentum of optimism in the country. And after having spent a few days in the US, you come back to France, and it's a little bit of a shock. It looks like in the US people are welcoming you in with open arms. Taxes are going to go down to 15%. The workshops that we can build in the US are subsidized in quite a few states, and the American president encourages this practice. The market is developing fast. Just look at the new store that Pietro opened in New York. It is an outstanding success. Lines 100 meters long. It is exceptional, and yet it is extremely elitist. And then you're back in France, and you see that taxes are going to go up, going to 40% in companies manufacturing in France. This is hard to believe. So the made in France is going to be taxed. Well, that's a good way to tame your enthusiasm. What a great idea to encourage people to outsource. I do not know if that's the government's ambition, but this is what they are going to achieve if they stick to this plan. And we did come up with alternatives, but because of the red tape, etc., it didn't really work. We should just appoint a person to, cut the red tape. But, appoint a person in charge of efficiency, but that doesn't work in France. So taxes, I'd rather not say anything about taxes. I prefer to take action quietly, calmly. There you go. Another question. Good evening, Antoine Beige from BNP Paribas Exane. 3 questions on my side. You've mentioned a slight increase, a slight improvement in China. Do you believe that this quote-unquote crisis is due to the economic environment and, more importantly, to the real estate market? Do you believe that with the stimulus plan that have been announced, the Chinese government will be able to rebuild confidence, or do you believe that there is a shift in consumption habits? My second question has to do with cost management. Jean-Jacques explained that there was a sort of dilemma, or at least 2 options in 2024. For 2025, I do not know. Given the good figures, the good results of the beginning of the year, are you planning on investing more, continuing investing, or are you going to have a mixed approach before you know more about this potential acceleration? My third question has to do with wines and spirits. You talked about 2 years. You are giving 2 years to the new teams. What are the challenges that this team is going to be faced with in these business groups? What were the mistakes that were were made in the past, and that led to a change in management. Maybe inventory management was an issue. Maybe enhanced competition for cognac and tequila, or some brown alcohol or spirits, and for champagne, maybe some sparkling wines coming from other countries. And since Jean-Jacques mentioned it, there were some rumors of divestment of the division. Personally, I don't believe in it, but I'd like to know what is your take on the matter.
Bon, ça je réponds tout de suite. Effectivement, c'est pas à l'ordre du jour du tout.
Yeah, well, it is not on the agenda. I can tell you.
Bon, si vous voulez, la Chine.
As for China,
je pense que le gouvernement chinois a pris conscience.
I believe that the Chinese government is now aware of the fact that they need to kickstart the economy. The economy needs to recover, and therefore a few plans have been announced to just help the economy. That's the first thing. The second thing, our high-quality products are still extremely desirable in China. People still want to buy our products.
Musique, pour prendre corps dans un environnement qui a été quand même successivement très affecté.
The environment was severely impacted by COVID. Then there was a strong recovery, followed by another crisis, the real estate crisis. So it's going to take some time. What I expect is to see a gradual recovery. So we're going to get back to a normal situation after 2 years. It's not going to happen overnight. In the US, well, it's going to be a boom. It's going to take more time for China to recover fully. As for investments, when you look at the revenue, well, it's just the end of January. You know, it's not the end of H1. But still, we are still investing. We're still communicating. We organize fashion shows. We have a lot of projects to keep this momentum. And I forgot what your third question was. It was about wine and spirits. Yes, no, divestment is not on the agenda. Another question.
Bonsoir.
Good evening. Antonin André from Le Journal du Dimanche. We've heard in the news about Tiffany's challenges, financial challenges. So, what is the financial situation really like? And are you questioning your choices? Any plans to roll out the brand in Europe, for example?
C'était une belle endormie.
Tiffany was a sleeping beauty.
Effectivement, pendant 10 ans de notre acquisition,
for 10 years before the acquisition, the stock market was booming, but Tiffany remained flat because the results did not go up.
Donc, c'est très bien pour notre acquisition.
It was excellent for the acquisition because we said that we were going to pay a lot for it, but I believe that it was the contrary. Such a prestigious, well-known brand, number one luxury brand in the US, was acquired and for an excellent price. But now, once we acquired it, it was a sleeping beauty, and we decided to wake her up.
Le fait de vouloir la réveiller, ça n'a pas plu à tout le monde.
And this wake-up call was not welcomed by everyone. When you're used to sleeping for 10 years and you're all of a sudden asked to become, fierce, and when you are expected to achieve high objective, some people don't accept that. So you are referring to some negative comments that were made, but unfortunately we were not able to keep everyone. And in passing, I'd like to mention that Mr. Zuckerberg, who I talked to last week, said that the 5% of least performance from Meta will be made redundant, or they will be promoted outwards, so to speak. So we didn't have a choice. At Tiffany, we had to let go some people. Retailers, shop assistants, etc. They were not happy, so they misrepresented what happened. But
les chiffres sont tout à fait différents de ce qui a été publié dans certains.
if you look at the figures, they are very different from what was published in the press, and we are quite confident. Q4 2024, we announced some decreases, but there is a 9% increase.
De l'année dernière.
The revenue or the profits from last year was double the profits from before the acquisition. Sales in jewelry were multiplied by 4.
Le Landmark a réussi.
The Landmark reported an outstanding performance, and it is the #1 luxury store for LVMH group, so we are very confident.
Évidemment, encore beaucoup de choses à faire.
Of course, we still have a lot to do.
Je ne vais pas m'étendre trop là-dessus, mais la stratégie.
I'm not going to talk too much about the strategy, but our strategy is about developing icons. We have 4 icons, 4 main icons that we are developing.
Progressivement, augmente sensiblement.
And they are growing substantially and gradually. We still have a few stores in the pipelines. It requires investments, but every time we open a new store or renovate a store, the revenue go up by 25%.
Je suis assez confiant.
So I am reasonably confident, and
qui ont transparu dans la
I believe that what you've read in the press
pour des raisons d'objectivité.
is not necessarily, or does not necessarily reflect reality.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions?
Any further questions?
Oui.
Yes?
Oui, bonjour, Edouard Aubin, Morgan Stanley.
Edouard Aubin from Morgan Stanley. Regarding the operating income, Mr. Guioni mentioned in the past that for the fashion and leather goods division, if you have a mid-single-digit growth of 4, 5, 6%, you would maintain the operating margin at a stable level. I just wanted you to confirm this assumption. So regarding the forex, you had a negative forex of 1 billion euros, if I'm not mistaken. If there are no major fluctuations in the forex, what are you planning on having in terms of forex impacts? As for DFS, several articles were published over the past few months that mentioned the fact that you are potentially thinking about. Well, you have some strategic decisions to make. So can we expect some major scope modifications for the group in the 12 or 24 months to come? So any potential divestments, basically.
Donc sur les marges monnaie maroquinerie, absolument.
So for the margins of fashion and leather goods, I can confirm. I believe that the rate could be even lower.
La capacité à contrôler à peu près les coûts en fonction.
We can control costs based on the revenue. Now, it is all about the timing. Sometimes we are caught. Well, there is some inertia effect that is difficult to manage, but I believe that we'll be able to manage that. The 2025 forex impact you talked about. You said that if there are no fluctuations, did you ever see a year where forex doesn't change? So theoretically, there could be a discrepancy. There was a positive forex impact last year, less so than in 2023. But if there is a change or an impact, it would not be as big as 1 billion that we had last year. And then a question about DFS and some potential strategic changes. Well, you won't be surprised, but in terms of strategic options, I can't tell you much. I can't tell you anything. Sorry.
Bonsoir, Thomas.
Good evening. Thomas Chauvet, Société City.
Ma première question.
My first question is the following.
Jean-Jacques, tu as évoqué l'impact immédiat.
Jean-Jacques, you talked about the unusual forex impact on gross and operating margin in 2024 because the prices did not increase.
Vous paraît avoir évolué favorablement.
Do you believe that the environment changed favorably in the US and in Europe? Do you believe that it is going to offset the impact of inflation on the raw material and labor cost inflation? Or are you thinking at group level about
le pricing.
Are you thinking about the pricing power of the industry?
Deuxième question, vous êtes le seul.
Second question, you are the only luxury group to very early on have seen the luxury hospitality as an important department to acquire new customers in new geographies. Could you give us an update regarding the recovery of Belmont, Cheval Blanc and Bulgari hotels? And could you tell us more about the Chinese as well? We hear a lot of comments about how Chinese customers are changing. They are not necessarily looking for luxury experiences, but they prefer to buy tangible goods instead of paying for an experience. How are you going to address that? And my third question, well, it's just an opportunity for me to wish all the best to Jean-Jacques at Moët & Cie. Good luck for the challenges. Thank you very much for your availability, for your professionalism with the analysis that was mentioned by Mr. Arios. Thank you very much, and I hope I will see you again in the division's vineyards.
Alors sur la première question, il faut pas confondre.
Right. Well, on the first question, we should make sure you distinguish between inflation and the forex impact on revenue. Inflation is fairly easy. You just need to increase prices 2 or 3%. It's fairly easy because it's no longer 4 or 5% as was the case in 2021, 2022. So we can increase the prices moderately, as we always have. But then there's the very local factor, which is offsetting currency drops by price hikes. We've done that. We did that in Japan, for instance, last year, but we haven't increased our prices there as much as the currency has dropped, hence the forex impact. If we had a more serene currency environment, it would be easy, and we would only have to manage inflation, and the 2% price increase would be easily put across the world, across the board, I mean. Hotels. Well, this is an interesting add-on to our luxury goods manufacturing business, insofar as we can manufacture luxury stays. We're quite pleased to see that we started from scratch 10 years ago. Cheval Blanc was launched in Courchevel, and I think nowadays everyone everywhere tells me, and rankings confirm that this is the highest, the luxury chain in the world. 5-star hotels. Not bad for something started 10 years ago. Meaning that we will invest as much as we can in that business, nor does it mean that they are as profitable as Vuitton, Dior or Bulgari. But it does mean that our clients can get a room, experience a stay, take the Orient Express in a slightly privileged environment. It's very much the same environment, as you said. It's experiment or experience-based luxury, and not just product-based luxury. Admittedly, as we own many of the facilities, that requires quite a lot of investment, significant long-term investment most of the time. So investments and expenses that are worthwhile. I mean, you know the Cheval Blanc in Paris, it's an extraordinarily well-located hotel. It took us some time to get it up and running, and it's a good way of diversifying our business, which goes along with Vuitton. It's not the same thing, but still. And it's true that our customers want to diversify their experience. I mean, when you buy a 50,000 euro Vuitton case, and that's the entry-level price, you quite like to spend your weekend in the Orient Express from Paris to Venice, stay at the Cipriani in Venice, and then go to the Vuitton store. So it's the same environment, the same sense of luxury. And again, we do this with moderation, as we do drink alcohol with moderation. Right, if there are no further questions. No, there are still some. Two final questions here.
Hi, good evening. It's Louise Singlehurst from Goldman Sachs, and I always apologise for asking a question in English, but there has to be one. Just two follow-ups for me, if I can do, please. Can you talk to us a little bit about your pricing architecture and how you evaluate pricing, particularly across Vuitton and Dior? There's obviously a lot of debate in the industry about pricing. Has it gone too far? But I presume there's more opportunity within mix versus price list. And secondly, I wonder if, Mr. Arnault, you spoke about the US and the optimism. When we think about the group in 5-10 years' time, we've obviously got a very balanced portfolio on the revenue mix today versus pre-COVID. How do you estimate that will go? Where do you feel most optimism by region over the medium to long term? And before I let go of the microphone, I'll also echo Thomas's comments with regards to Jean-Jacques. A very big thank you.
Pour le prix, il faut être très attentif. Parce que
price, well,
les clients,
you have to be very careful, indeed.
De plus en plus conscients.
Customers are increasingly aware of the value of the product beyond the price, if you will. Increasing prices is something that is properly understood by clients. The problem is when you increase your prices for no good reason. You have to be able to justify a price hike, better quality, better finish, different materials used. And it is true, and I suppose that's why you're asking the question, a number of houses have, unfortunately, and again, not all, but some, have increased their prices in a somewhat extravagant manner without really giving any justification or having any justification to provide. I mean, pushing prices up 15% just doesn't make sense if there's no change in the product. And if that happens, then the clients just wonder what's happening and why they're being taken for a ride. You have to be realistic, honest about it, and give the clients high-quality products, justifiable quality, and therefore justifiable prices, and that's what we try and do, and I think we're pretty good at it. Louise, on your question about the geographical balance of revenue in the future, well, the current geographical breakdown is pretty good, 25% in the US, in Europe, and 30% in Asia, with the rest broken down between Japan and the Middle East. It looks good because it means that we still have a good balance when things go badly in one area. So what has to be done now is not so much focus on the geographical balance of the whole group, but really do it for the brands. Louis Vuitton, Dior, and wines and spirits do manage, but we really have to make sure that all of our brands manage to have a balanced presence in the US, in Europe, and in Asia, and that's not always the case. And of course, the brands I were mentioning are not in the LVMH group. Last question here on that side.
Bonjour messieurs, Juliette Garnier, je travaille pour le journal Le Monde.
Good evening, Juliette Garnier, Le Monde.
Je travaille pour le journal Le Monde. Je voulais revenir sur Tiffany.
Can I come back to Tiffany? Could you put an end to the sponsoring contract between Tiffany and Jay-Z, given the civil case that is being brought against him for raping an underage girl? And second question, on La Samaritaine, if I understand rightly, LVMH has bought out La Samaritaine 100%. Can you tell us more about what is being said that La Samaritaine shows losses to the tune of 90 million euros? Thank you. Let me start maybe with that last question. I have no idea where that figure comes from. It's entirely preposterous. The operation
à la Samaritaine, et c'est d'ailleurs pour ça.
And the management was mainly focused on Chinese customers, and we are taking it out of the DFS group to put it in LVMH to have a broader opening on a broader customer base. But no, it's never been 90 million losses. As concerns the unfortunate incident that you mentioned, namely Jay-Z being charged or accused of these facts, I must say I do not know where the proceedings have got to, and as far as I can tell, until he is innocent until proven guilty. Also, says Mr. Bianchi, the contract lapsed in 2022.
Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much, says Mr. Arnaud.